So excited to talk about what I believe is actually one of the most disruptive ways to build a SaaS marketing and a go-to-market. Is this idea of something that I think all of us have studied in textbooks, back in the day, but perhaps put a little bit on the back shelf. This idea of owned media. So really excited to walk you all through that. Give you a quick introduction to who I am. Spend some time just justifying why owned media, why all of a sudden, given kind of what's happening in the industry around us today that's paving the way for owned to be a way to break the noise, a way to really impact the business. And then making sure, this is our week, how can we leave this place with tactical tips? Like, what are a few things we can go back to our business and implement in order to either take steps forward in owned media, start from scratch, maybe modernize kind of our existing owned media approach. And I think we'll have a decent amount of time for questions too, so excited to chat with you guys more. All right, so I'll start with introduction. So again, my name is Anthony. I'm formerly a chief marketing officer. I've only been a founder for about a year. And so I've gone from sort of an operator to entrepreneur, which is terrifying and awesome. But one thing that has always been kind of at the heart of the marketing kind of playbook that I cared about was this idea of brand. And in the B2B context, we don't talk about brand very often, but we think about brand as something that's kind of like separate from growth. It's like a corporate marketing thing that we'll invest in one day. And I have found that there's been nothing that's more transformational for a business and for a marketing engine than putting brand at the center of how we operate. I had a chance to write a book about this called Category Creation. And now I'm taking kind of about 13 years or so of operator experience for building a platform to help companies kind of build some of this more emotive kind of go-to-market into how we go to market. So, and the company's called AudiencePlus. We haven't launched yet. We're actually like 2 weeks, and so we're not talking too much yet about what we're building, but we've been building a community of people who care about this topic. And so if you hear anything today that strikes a chord or you want to dive deeper into this, head over to audienceplus.com and subscribe. We have events once a month digitally, a ton of content that we produce around this idea that we'll cover today. All right. So let's talk about why owned media matters. Why should anyone be paying attention to this presentation? We're going through what I believe is a massive shift in how we go to market in the B2B context. We have been acquiring customers historically in a very transactional way. I mean, think about Google B2C and some of these other kind of channels. But we're moving to this more kind of relational go-to-market. And I'm not the only one kind of thinking about this. HubSpot at their conference this year talked about community-led growth as this kind of next wave in marketing. They talk about connection, these kind of emotive concepts as the way that we're going to actually monetize and grow revenue. And I think if you hear this message, like any marketer would agree, and they say, hey, that sounds really noble, and like I want to be a part of that, I believe in it, it's all good, but this year, I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to just hit the number. I have less resources than I've ever had before, and the expectations to deliver on pipeline are just as high, if not higher. So while all this sounds really good, I just can't afford to invest in it quite yet. And the good news, as far as I've sort of understood it, is that the same headwinds that are preventing us from becoming more community-led or relational, or however you want to refer to that, are the things that are slowing us down from being anything good today. The first is, there has never been so much noise pollution on the internet today. When you think about, obviously, the ChatGPTs and others are just contributing right into how easy it is to just create and publish content online. And our content teams that we're kind of obviously hiring and managing are typically creating content for an algorithm. They're producing SEO content, performance marketing content. They're buying into the inbound marketing playbook that we've done for years. But they don't have enough time or bandwidth to be focused on the content that's created for humans. Podcasts, videos, live streaming, the way that we as consumers actually engage with information today. So that's putting a strain internally on marketing teams. How do we resource this? How can we both do the SEO kind of thing that we know we have to do with table stakes, but also create enough margin to breakthrough the voice. The other piece is it's getting more and more expensive and inefficient to distribute content through paid. Paid media, in my experience, is one of the largest line items in the marketing program's budget, often the one that's the most scrutinized as well. And what I have found, at least, is the amount of leads that we're generating through paid, it looks great at the top of the funnel because we really optimize that landing page, but it's not the cohort of leads that ends up converting all the way through revenue, at least not at the same clip as content and events, since there are more relational channels. Just as an example, Airbnb is on the record for actually moving their search marketing budget into branded content, and they're still hitting their kind of targets earnings every quarter, and they're attributing that efficiency to some of those changes they made on paid advertising. So paid is getting more inefficient. Our relationship with social media is changing. We're following the news with our friend Twitter and everyone else. What we're realizing, and I think we in B2B are realizing this maybe a little bit after the consumer folks and the creators and all these types of things, is that our organic reach on these platforms is governed by an algorithm that we don't control. So you can have, I don't know, let's say 1,000 followers on LinkedIn, you post something, and that thing, we'll talk about this in a second, that message is only shown to a fraction of those people who have opted in to follow you. So as our relationship with social media is changing, it's bringing, from a distribution perspective, it's bringing an importance to actually building a first-party data set with our audience. So we can't rely on all of these third parties for access to our audience. We have to build that direct relationship with them. Especially in a world where third-party cookies are going away, or at least really limited, at least in terms of their efficacy. It's all about building that first-party data set. So the good news is, at least the headwinds, who have gone before us to actually kind of manage through this process. In my experience, has been that the consumer media industry has faced these same challenges. Now, consumer media, they think about the funnel a lot differently than we think about it. They have this notion of like rented, owned, monetized. Rented means social media channels. Anywhere you're renting the algorithm, right? LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. It could be content networks like YouTube, Spotify, whatever. And then even SEO from a Google search perspective, right? We don't own kind of the distribution from that channel. So we in B2B have a presence in those channels for sure, but our intention is very different. In the consumer context, specifically the media companies, their goal is to de-platform that audience into something that they call subscribers. And we kind of have this notion of subscribers in B2B. It's like that newsletter form that sits in your footer, maybe it's on like 3 clicks into your website to actually find a way to give you that information. But in consumer media, the subscription is everything. It's relational. It's an exchange of value. If you wanted to see more content like this that you've indicated you care about, click here and get access to the newsletter. This is much better conversions than what we see. So the other benefit is they're building that first-party data set with their subscribers. So we have a very clear window into engagement because they own that engagement data set, and they can sell folks products, whether it's premium subscriptions, event attendance, courses, in our case, SaaS licenses ultimately. So I think the big lesson here is to navigate these changes, we have to think about how can we own our audience? How can we build that direct relationship with our audience? And we'll talk about kind of what that could look like. The piece I want to kind of disclaim, I guess, here is that what I'm proposing isn't like go to your demand gen team and throw it all away and start over. It's really just expressing a lot of the work that we're doing through the lens of owned media. So we're doing a lot of it. People love to hate on webinars. Webinars kind of work still. But what is a webinar if not a stream that's exclusive to subscribers, right? It's just maybe we amp up a little bit of the production value, but it's just a similar tactic that expressed through this idea of an owned media program. There's several other evolutions of this strategy. So this all sounds pretty expensive. Like, okay, how do I become a media company? What does this mean? How do I, for a small team, I have a lot of budget. the belief that I have, hopefully I can convince you of before at the end of the day, is that this can actually be one of the most efficient ways to go to market. What we had talked about earlier was if you could take like 10% of your paid media budget or less, you could fund an entire own media strategy for the year. And so we'll walk through some of those kind of tips and ideas here in a second. All right, let's dive in. So these are five things to think about through the lens of efficiency, to be clear, in order to either go from 0 to 1 with owned media or to reimagine your existing kind of go-to-market demand gen programs through the lens of owned media. All right, so I'll walk through all of these. First is to define a brand strategy that inspires your audience. I'll come back to all of these. Edelman releases this kind of report every year. Maybe the marketing comms, PR space have followed along quite a bit what the content that Edelman is producing. They released a stat that 63% of consumers buy or advocate for brands based on beliefs and values. 69% of candidates agree that having social impact involve their decision making for what type of companies they join. This is data that in B2B we kind of just ignore. Like, this is great for consumer research and like these other things, but in B2B, we have to confront this. We have to do something with this idea that there is an emotive side to the purchasing process, that people want to work with people where they have a shared kind of sense of vision. And so where does that leave us? It's this belief that, and maybe you've heard like Simon Sinek's kind of golden triangle kind of TED talk. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. We don't often spend enough time defining our why, which is a critical starting point for content strategy, for really just building kind of a brand and how we show up in the market. We've spent so many years in the business context talking about the what with our products, or the how with our distribution channels, these types of things. But the why, unlocking the why and adding language to the why, is a powerful way to kind of start building that trust with our audience, to start kind of engaging on this more emotive level. And from a media perspective, I think an important starting point is to ensure that as we're building our content roadmap and our engines, like it becomes sort of the calibration point for us to come there through the door. So how do you build it? So I'll go back up again. It's a brand strategy project is the language really around this idea of putting words to our why. The way we really develop a brand strategy project is you pay the agency about $600K, right? I think or something along those lines. You spend a lot of time in a room with your founder, who's like, what are we doing? And then ultimately you end up with this. So my goal is to save you $500K in a lot of conversations and basically just take this, cross out what we have written in here. This is a brand on a page. This is the output of a expensive, long agency project. This is the one that we put together for Copy, which is the company I was at before starting this business. And it all kind of ladders up to this purpose statement or this broader idea. It's informed by conversations with, again, your founders, your executive team, stakeholder interviews with your closest customers, prospects. Then maybe even, the bonus mode is going into consumer research and actually going to people who have no idea who you are, what you do, and kind of digging into the very kind of human component about your products and ultimately the problems that your products solve. And so, for those that don't know Hopin, we developed kind of developed a virtual events software platform, very utilitarian, very focused on the what. So our job is to find the why. I'll spare you the whole conversation, but basically we thought that there was something really powerful about this idea of feeling. In enterprise software, our products don't ever end up creating a feeling for us unless it's frustration or something. And then this idea of closeness. We have never been more connected as we're finding connections or whatever as an industry. And yet we feel so far apart. Social media has connected us globally, right? Amplified a lot of the divisiveness kind of within culture. And so we thought this idea of making the world feel closeness went beyond connection. It was a very kind of personal type of emotion. It was something that we wanted to kind of build out. I share this business, I don't think we'll do ever, but it was fun to run. But the core piece I want to leave with on this side is It's really great. Again, if you're in revenue marketing, all this, I can feel maybe some eyes rolling, but this has to connect to the product value proposition in B2B. Like in the consumer world, it can be a little ethereal, a little arts and crafts marketing, but you have to be able to build the top of the slide down to the product portfolio and connect your product value proposition to the bigger brand strategy. Otherwise, it's sort of, kind of lost in the market. Anyway, I think that point, but I think it's an important starting point. Because if you want to talk to an audience, you want to break through the noise, leading with that emotion, I think is a very powerful tool for marketing. So once you've defined that, the next challenge is to produce content in an authentic way. I'll break this one down. When we started the company, again, I was a little biased as a CMO. I was like, great, we need to be the best customer of what we're trying to do. So let's go film like the chef's table for B2B marketing. It's going to be like high production. We want Netflix quality. And so we reached out to some like friendlies to give us, in the agency world, quote us on doing like an episodic video series. And the quote came back at the friends and family rate, $200K for 6 episodes. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is never going to work. Like there's no way I can do that being at the company trying to do it, let alone stand on stage like this and tell you this is what it takes. Run on media, it's $200K for 6 episodes. And thankfully I was very wrong, because Netflix quality, I think, it's sort of a lie that we've kind of taught ourselves. I think my generation, millennials, have really kind of bought into this idea, when the generation coming after us has experienced and engaged with content that's all created on this. Has anyone heard of Monkman or Monk World by chance? Give this talk a few times. You have? Oh my gosh, amazing. I've given this talk a few times. I've never had somebody that actually knows. This is awesome. To correct me if I'm wrong on some of this, but this is like a squishy dog toy thing, and basically it's like a whatever, right? It's like a little candy aisle, checkout aisle, like thing. But the way they went to market is they created a TikTok channel where they're basically dropping this thing from high altitudes. They're running it over with a car, and it just liquefies and then comes back to life. And they shot it extremely low production. They shot it all on an iPhone. They've got 2.1 million followers, and this idea came, this example was sourced from a friend of mine that works in the e-commerce space, where they're a customer, and they're one of the most successful products on their e-commerce platform, all because of this outsized impact they made with really weird video. But the point that I want to make with this is you don't need to focus on chef's table. You need to focus on what is authentic for your brand. What is an expression of that brand strategy that you come up with? What is your audience going to actually want to watch and believe that is almost like having some entertainment value within the context of the market that you're operating? We did this. So we did this. We spent about $1,000 for a desk setup. It's decently good. It's not the best, but it's not $200K. And once we make that investment, we can now kind of make 1 million videos, right? Take that CapEx hit up front and then scale it from there. And then we built kind of a home studio type of thing in an apartment building, about $15K. A fraction of what that initial kind of agency agreement would have been. But now we have an infinite amount of content that we can produce without spending an incremental dollar. I think for this to work, focusing on authenticity matters, but then cadence is so much more important than being able to have, again, chef's table. In fact, it could actually work against you, because I think that a lot of folks that are engaging with super high quality content think it's commercial. I think you're trying to sell them something versus this sort of more authentic kind of way to engage. So the good news is not only does this not cost a lot, but in fact be more effective by doing a little bit of the kind of good enough production. I think we're somewhere within the range of this budget in your office, or if you're working remote, kind of in your home offices. All right, the third one, leverage rented channels to capture attention. Again, when I mean rented, I mean social networks, anywhere you don't really own that kind of algorithm that can direct kind of access to that audience. Content networks like YouTube and others, and search networks. Has anyone seen a LinkedIn post where every line has a line break after it, and there's no link on it, and you're like, why are there's weird emojis in places, and no one talks like this. Like, why? What's going on? It turns out they're trying to game the algorithm to actually get more viewership of their post. And it's a silly thing, but it's what we have to do to try to work that algorithm that we don't control in order to get the reach that we're intending. Now, I had a kind of frustrating moment because I had a post that went up at some point, and it did decently well. And the next day, I posted fairly similar type of thing. It played by the rules, everything that I sort of could understand to not get shadow banned basically on LinkedIn. And I got a fraction of the engagement that I got. And the same structure of the post I did maybe 24 hours later. And I was like, what is going on? How can we navigate this? So I did what every normal sane person does. I filed a support ticket with LinkedIn to try to get some answers and figure out what is actually driving your decision behind this. And this is what they said. The first one was reset your expectations. Oh, you have a pipeline target. Nice. Reset your expectations on that. That one didn't feel very good. Second, that posts are scored based on quality. They went into no detail on what quality means. Is it including a picture? Is it uploading a video natively? Is it including a link or not including a link? They're very opaque on that front. Third, if your followers don't engage, they'll be less likely to see content from you. So that means that all of your followers have to like or comment on everything you ever publish in order to have a shot at seeing it. Very scalable. Fourth, posting too often leads to reduced distribution. If you read the poll there, not posting enough leads to reduced distribution. So kind of the half in the middle. And then if you share content twice, a link, let's say, or something along those lines, and try to send any traffic off property on LinkedIn, you get a fraction of the impressions you otherwise would. I'm not trying to just hate on LinkedIn. This is just the normal thing, right? Twitter's doing this, all of these, every kind of space where we don't have that direct relationship. We're at the mercy of very opaque decisions or configurations that we have to navigate. So how do you actually do it? First is a language I learned from Rand Fishkin, who gives a random SEO kind of world. He talks about this idea of building algorithmic capital, which is basically saying, play by the rules for a little bit. And as you kind of build up your algorithmic score on LinkedIn's kind of back end or whatever, then depreciate that capital by linking out to your property. So, whether it's a webinar invite or whatever it is, you kind of build up your algorithmic capital and then send that traffic to your site and get dinged kind of, with LinkedIn or whoever, and then build back up again. And so that link is important to start driving folks into that owned relationship, which typically is an email address ultimately. So you subscribing to your content or something like that, and you see that kind of substacks in the consumer world that are kind of doing that, and there's kind of no real analogy that can be used. Short form video works extremely well on these platforms. They talk about zero-click content. Short form, when folks are scrolling the feed, are great ways to kind of tease out a full podcast episode or whatever it is that you're hosting, kind of embed that in, and then eventually kind of drive that traffic over. And finally, if you are going to use paid media, you can pay to amplify your content network in some of these networks. It makes a lot of sense because that's what they're designed to do. These are advertising platforms, maybe disguised as social networks, but that's where their revenue comes from. And so you get a bit more accessibility if you're willing to pay for it. But of course, that goes back to the whole problem. All right. So now you've been able to kind of siphon a little bit of your audience off of social media. Now what? Well, you got to get them to actually want to subscribe to your brand. And again, when we say subscription, it's we talk about opt-in to our marketable database. We talk about somebody tricked you into downloading a white paper or something, and now we're going to hit you with 8 emails and 4 phone calls, and whatever. A subscription is much more relational than that. Again, we're all used to a subscription in our consumer lives. There's a connotation of value exchange. I'm going to learn something or be entertained by this or whatever. I'm willing to subscribe. I want to hear more about this topic from you, and we don't do it enough. And the interesting thing is, when you think about the web conversion rates, average website conversion rate for B2B SaaS is about 1.1%. Any guesses what it is for the kind of run-of-the-mill consumer media?
0.5?
10%. So that's 10x improvement in web conversions when leading with a value-driven call to action, not just a commercial one. And don't hear me and take your demo request button off, turn off contact sales. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying we need to elevate the other thing. That today is either, again, buried deep within our footer or somewhere nowhere to be seen on our websites. This idea of building an audience of would-be customers when they are warmed up and educated, excited, and ready to then engage. The way you do that, first, is really around this idea of building a value proposition for a subscription. And then marketing, why should someone subscribe to my content or my thought leadership? And the first is give away enough for free. So make sure that people can have some sort of freedom in their mindset and can kind of have access to a lot of the content and get an idea of the type of value they'd be getting if they did subscribe. Second is this idea of exclusive content. And I mentioned kind of webinar examples of an exclusive experience, right? This is an exclusive event for people who signed up and authored or registered and are here. And so thinking about how can we create programs not just to pull people into our database, but how can we create programs for the people in our database to use language like nurture, or actually continue to educate them and not just try to sell them something ultimately. We want them ultimately, but not something explicitly up front. Third is the idea of not gating content necessarily, but rather gating access to membership. Can you imagine if you're on Netflix or something, you're whatever, you're watching it, and then you want to click on a show and you get the payment kind of window that pops up. And the first 30 seconds start playing, you're interrupted with a form. I just want to watch the thing. I think that rather what a lot of consumer media companies have done really well, I'll walk through an example here, is gain access to their community or being a member of that audience and having certain rights and privileges as part of the value proposition. And then everything else is free. It's ungated. It's totally available for everybody. The idea of merch is kind of having a moment, which is a little different than swag. Merch is not just your company logo or company branding on it, but it's kind of this thing that can be used to create a sense of belonging within your industry or have folks feel like they're part of the inside joke. And there's something that they're proud to wear kind of out into the world, I guess, when they're not at work. So merch kind of helps really create this and build that sort of emotive connection between the brand and the audience. And then finally, understand the data. We now, if folks are subscribing, we have insights into what's driving them in. Is it a certain video series that we're running? Is it a event that really is driving a lot of folks in? We now have context that we can mine to make smarter decisions on the type of content we should be producing or programs we could be running. And so the example that I'll give that's just really open to the consumer world, it's kind of become a meme now to reference them, I feel like, but Liquid Death. Folks are following what Liquid Death's doing. I'll be the 4,000th marketer to be on this year. But they have this idea, it's like a value proposition subscribing being part of their audience. Now, I don't condone their language with some of their CTA kind of thing, but you see their brand strategy being expressed through some of this language. They only ask you to sell your soul to be a member of their audience. And you see that you can get access to merch, exclusive events, content, all of these things that you would otherwise, the average person that goes to Whole Foods and buys it off the shelf doesn't get. So these are people that are diving in, leaning in. Again, they got their own thing going, but you kind of get the idea. And building that relationship, fostering that idea of community of people that may or may not even be a customer at this point. All right. Finally, proving the value of audience engagement on outcomes. The belief that I have is that audience engagement is the new metric for marketing. It's the new leading indicator. We talked about MQLs in the past, which, again, guilty here, but it's one of those manipulated metrics in the world, right? If we got to hit our MQL target, well, we lower our threshold, we can increase kind of paid spend, whatever, we can get there. I don't know that either. But the idea of audience engagement is this is actually fundamentally something we can measure very closely. How are our prospects within maybe a certain persona or company size segment actually interacting with our brand, consuming content? There's a public scale SaaS business that we're working with that actually rebranded their campaigns team into what they call audience marketing managers, and each there's basically an AMM that's aligned to each persona. They've given them budget to produce a bunch of shows, produce a podcast, produce a newsletter, do a video series, whatever, for that persona. And they're measuring them off of audience engagement. And that's the conversation that they're taking to their sales team, their CS teams. These are target accounts. This is how engaged each of those accounts are and what we're doing to improve that engagement. Anyway, how do you do that? It's a tricky balance because, again, there are a lot of folks who have subscribed to your thought leadership and your brand and have not opted into a sales conversation. And we're, spend all this time talking about trust being this important thing to foster and authenticity and all that. You have to be very cautious not to break that trust by, again, putting it into a 5-call cadence and all these types of things just because they wanted to attend the event. And so the first thing I would do is create what we call an audience engagement score. So let's kind of actually understand who are the most engaged members of our audience at the individual level, at the account level, and through that, we at least have some like a roadmap of who to potentially reach out to based on certain thresholds, that sort of thing. We don't want somebody to just sign up and subscribe for a newsletter the next day. They're inundated. And then the second bit is figuring out, using that data that helps them already understand what creates engagement or what accelerates engagement for different cohorts of their audience. For CMOs or CXOs, let's say, it may not be a podcast. It might be a dinner or some field event or something in the region that's really the amplifier of that. So how can we look at all of our audience engagement scores with a certain threshold and plan an event? It might be a little hard, but maybe do something virtual, whatever, to actually move them down the funnel through their kind of life, their journey with you, because we know there's correlation with kind of deeper engagement through that channel. Third, align content and product value propositions. We can't just be go back to that brand on the page, we can't just be operating our content at that top Y level. We have to make sure that we're producing content all the way through that funnel. Fourth is thinking about your first human touch with your audience, whether it's your SDRs or AEs or whatever, as consultants or folks that are kind of subscribing to the value-based selling motion where it's a bit less about, hey, you want to buy a thing, but rather what problems are you trying to solve? How can we help you? We know that this is a topic that resonated with you. How can we sort of take this posture of service as we're engaging with folks? Creating enough opportunity for people to hand raise and say, hey, I actually want to learn more about the product. If you think can happen organically. The value trust process, I think a lot of this is a belief that if we're going to continue to use content and media to engage an audience to build a community, that there is a net effect that actually can be measured too of building brand equity. So if the link doesn't work every time, folks that are following you, they know what you're doing, they know what your business is about. If they continue to be exposed to your content, they'll find your website and they'll sign up or they'll join. I think that's what a lot of the Chris Walker Refine Labs kind of strategy makes sense, of having the self-reported attribution back on your website. People might have watched the video or something, and that's how they found it. So these are the 5. Really think this is just kind of the starting point, but a good kind of high-level overview of how to think about media. If any of this resonated, we're producing a ton of content on this topic. And so we're learning a lot. I think it's kind of a brave new world. It's kind of like a consumerization of B2B marketing, what it feels like. But I think it's very impactful for it. Both are looking to break through the way to run more. So that's all the content I have. There is any questions or
All right.
Go.
So I listened to this TED Talk, and it was like how to build a black belt branding. So you talked about if you want to create a great brand with customers, first you want to create a great brand for your employees. What are your thoughts on that?
Completely. I mean, the second Edelman kind of quote was about pulling in the right kind of talent to your company. I often think about like brand and culture as two sides of the same coin. And so you can't have a brand strategy that is completely disconnected from your, yeah, exactly. So it comes down to purpose, I think, in general, and people want to feel like they're part of something.
Hey, thanks for coming out. Love what you're sharing. Curious what you're hearing or seeing around how NFTs can play a role in membership and connect different communities and offer up things in maybe a new way.
Yeah, I'll admit I'm not as like I didn't follow Web3 as closely as probably I should. I was like deep in Web2 and going all in. But my understanding is really there's a lot of powerful ideas around data ownership, around building blockchain and NFTs. And so thinking about how can you as a consumer who's interacting with all of these different consumer media properties maintain your identity and protect your identity digitally. That's one kind of aspect. Second is I have seen a lot of consumer media companies actually give an NFT as kind of a value, like a part of their value proposition to subscribers. You also get this like thing that's like a badge that you basically kind of a digital badge you can have to associate as a member. But I know that there's interaction, and I know there's actually a lot of companies, even on the consumer side, that are doing like a Web3 version of like Patreon and Substack and those types of things. And I know there's got to be an opportunity for us to haven't fully explored it ourselves. Thank you, Dad.
Can you, if this is something can you talk about using social media to funnel people in the Discord stack as a valuable strategy?
Yeah.
And then serving the content that you make on Discord stack and staying engaged with people there, which might be other disruptions.
Yeah. I think Slack, I'm more familiar with Slack as that strategy. Yeah, great. Perfect. Well, we haven't used it in practice much, but and I believe in Slack you can have email access. You know, as folks are subscribing, you have email. What I don't know is you have the legal consent to email them from an opt-in perspective, potentially inferred depending on your region. I think the strategy is very similar though, because it's saying, hey, we have our company account, I don't know, that has like 5,000 followers on LinkedIn. How can we get these folks into Slack? They're going to penalize that link. You know, it doesn't matter where it's going as long as it doesn't start with LinkedIn.com. You know, they're going to penalize it. So I think a lot of these strategies will work quite well. The challenge I have found, which again may not be the case for everyone, is Slack has been a hard place to moderate a lot of conversation. And what I have sort of done is I end up just taking a bunch of links to content from our blog or whatever, putting it into Slack and trying to ignite conversation in that channel. So my hypothesis, is can you facilitate a lot of conversation around the content versus conversation kind of in a silo forum type model. But I think in general, the idea of deplatforming products from social to Slack resonates deeply, especially if Slack went away and you still have the ability to message your marketing you spent years in building. That's I think the key difference. It's like making sure that you can retain that direct relationship in conversations.
Hi, thank you for sharing all of this. It's really interesting. So you mentioned Substack and you mentioned deplatforming, and I'm wondering what your opinion is on the platforms like Substack and social channels that have added a paid element to grow your audience, whether or not you recommend going that route, and if you don't recommend going that route, what do you recommend instead?
Yeah. So Substack, I think it's awesome. I think they've done for a lot of this stuff. Really, I think center on the creator and consumer in these cases more than BB. But the idea of like paying for content, I think is actually profound. Drift, I remember Drift all back when they Drift Insider, like they had Insider and they had Insider Plus, which are for e-learning and some added things that can help kind of go to the next level from our free content. Maybe there's extra production costs that went into doing the thing. Events cost money to produce, we charge our attendees typically, and it's kind of an understood practice. I think they actually pioneered a lot of this in B2B at least. And I think we see lessons in the consumer world of this working. There's no reason it couldn't happen in B2B. The one thing that I think makes it really great is you talk to a CFO about revenue that you're generating from marketing in SaaS. They don't want to see that revenue. Like, this isn't services, this isn't software, like, keep it or do something with it. And so for us, it's helped us tell a story about efficiency in marketing, where we can reinvest the revenue that we're making through sponsorships, through things like premium content, events, whatever, into kind of overall lowering our CAC burden. So I like it as a strategy. I think it's really hasn't happened much yet in B2B that I've seen, but I think Substack and others are paving the way.
What do you think about leveraging influencer content to help build out in B2B?
Yeah, look at this slide. This is so good. I think it's incredible for many reasons. If you think about the value proposition of an influencer, in some cases, depending on how much influence they have, they get to align their professional brand with you, the company that's willing to pay them, that's willing to associate with them. And then from our perspective as the brand, we get to leverage their brand equity that they've developed to better inform our media approach. We get their built-in distribution. They have followers. They commit to actually pushing that content through their audience. And then, over time, if you think about the digital surface that sits on your website, whether it's your blog, however you're going to define it, thinking about that space as a place for the community to gather versus just we're the brand that's the authoritarian kind of brand to tell you how to do your job. No, we're going to build the stage and bring the voices from the industry to actually educate the market, push this movement forward. Influencers play a huge part of that. It's not like influence. I don't think it has to be like a super expensive influencer marketing thing. You're selling accounting software. Finding great influencers that maybe are early in their career, but they're great on TikTok. They can create content that breaks through the noise. There's a lot of good folks that you have to be effective at that. I love it. Oh, last thing. I mentioned earlier, it takes a lot of time and work to produce content. So paying that influencer that's really good at it, do it, help you achieve the cadence that you need and be really impactful.
I actually speak for you. So another thing that companies, when you're young, I guess it's expensive to get cancer. So you can, first of all, everybody's work on their phone, right? You're not LinkedIn, you have 2,000,
Yeah.
But when you're on LinkedIn, so that was also you do the ad finding, what you want to get connected.
Yeah.
You then, you post their work, and that's a great way to connect with them. That's a great way for them to say,
Yeah.
Great. Right?
So reciprocity, is that the name of the thing?
I think that's one way to think of it. Of course, there's ways to for that.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't create your own leadership is I know it's stuff.
No. But one of the best things that we did, I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that we did early on was we hosted a show or a podcast, or we call it a show, and we just went to all the smartest people and asked them to be on our show. And now we built a relationship with them, and that has turned into advisory in some cases. A few cases turned into customers for us as well. Again, we're very early, but the idea of engaging someone from a relational, perspective, building that relationship, influencers all in the same process.
That was amazing. Thank you, Anthony. Let's give him a round of applause.